What is up, Freeland? My name is Jonas Wells.
And I'm Hope Chloa.
Today we will be celebrating the end of a decade, looking back on all the rad moments and not so rad moments of the 1980s.
First up, we have the Challenger Space Shuttle. This space shuttle was delayed for 6 days due to weather and technical problems before it launched on January 28, 1986. There were warnings about the cold weather the morning of the launch and that it would be dangerous. They ignored the warning and the Challenger lifted off at 11:39 a.m. About 73 seconds later, the shuttle went up into fire and smoke. It broke apart and plunged into the ocean. 10 years later, 2 large pieces washed up on Florida shore, and no one from the crash survived.
That is a not so rad moment.
Totally.
One event that may have been one of the biggest was the court case of New Jersey v. TLO. This case was not only controversial, but questioned our Constitution as a whole. This case came to be when a high school student, just like maybe one of you, had her purse searched at a school because someone had called the police, saying she was carrying something. The policeman found cigarettes and a little marijuana in the bag. During the trial, she made the claim that it was unconstitutional for the police to search her bag without a warrant, but it was later revealed that under the Fourth Amendment, it was constitutional to search someone under the necessary circumstances without a warrant. She was sentenced to 1 month on parole.
Wow. That's
Whack.
whack. Not gnarly. Another thing that happened was the immigration laws. One immigration law was the Refuge Act of 1980. This act created the Federal Refuge Resettlement Program. It also reduced the worldwide amount of immigrants from 290,000 to 270,000. Another law was the Immigration Reform and Control Act, or IRCA. That happened on January 1986. This act legalized aliens who had lived in the United States in an unlawful status since January 1st, 1982. It also established punishments, banning employers from hiring aliens that are unauthorized from working in the United States.
Maybe this decade wasn't as radical as I really thought it was. The next topic that we reflect on might make some of you totally gag yourselves with a spoon. The savings and loan crisis of 1980s was when citizens like yourself wanted to deposit money into market funds instead of the S&L institutions. This caused over 1,000 S&L accounts to fail, losing all of the depositors' money. The government had to pay depositors back, so they had taxpayers pay $132 billion of the $160 billion that they had to pay back, and then S&L paid the rest. It has been known to be the biggest bank failure since the Great Depression. Made me and my family need to take a chill pill. We will be right back after this commercial break.
Can't let go, can't get enough.
That an amplified human voice could shatter a glass is remarkable. That a cassette recording of that voice can shatter a glass is amazing. But after 1,000 plays, can the same cassette still shatter a glass? It can if it's Memorex. Now even after 1,000 plays, reproduction so true, we ask, is it live or is it Memorex?
Those who think getting a car phone is not for them, whatever the reason, haven't kept up with the booming industry of cellular radio telephones. Scenes like this are becoming commonplace in U.S. cities where cellular is available today. This revolution in communications could make it possible for more and more people to have a phone in their car, or even one that travels with you. Like this unique cellular portable made by Motorola, which weighs only 30 ounces. Right now, businessmen and women are major users of radio telephones where cellular is in service. But more people will take advantage of cellular as its benefits become apparent. Eventually, seeing people using cellular phones may seem as commonplace as someone checking time on an electronic watch, figuring on an electronic calculator, or programming on an electronic computer. Industry watchers say there are only a few thousand cellular phones in use right now, but that number is expected to grow considerably within the next few years during the cellular revolution.
And we're back, and we're talking about the women of the 1980s. To start us off, we have Sandra Day O'Connor. She was the first female Supreme Court justice. Before this, no law firm would allow her to work in a good or high position because she was a woman. Ronald Reagan then chose her out of a dozen other male and women to be appointed to the High Court. On September 25, 1981, she was sworn into the 102nd Justice and was known as the first woman on Supreme Court. Jolene Ferraro was the first woman to receive the vice presidential nomination from either of the country's two major parties. She was a skilled public speaker and usually talked to sizable crowds. She ran with Walter Mondale in the 1984 presidential election.
Enough of the boring, depressing stuff, right? And let's look back on one of the biggest celebrations of the decade. Ever since the Berlin Wall was put up during World War II to separate East and West Berlin, or Germany, the Germans couldn't get to each other's side. President Reagan, in one of the most memorable speeches of our time, called for the wall to be torn down. Several weeks of civil unrest led to East Germany's government allowing people from East Germany to visit West Germany. Because of this, East Germans stayed at the embassy in West Germany and refused to go back. On November 9th, 1989, it was announced that the wall would be torn down. German citizens rejoiced and climbed the wall, meeting their fellow citizens on the other side. Construction was called to begin this summer.
And we'll be
The 1980s was an incredible decade, and the best thing about it was the music. Superstars like Hall & Oates and James Taylor recorded unforgettable love songs that have become classics. Now you can get the 80s' biggest hits all on one collection, Forever 80s. Over 2.5 hours of music featuring Belinda Carlisle,
is not sold in stores.
Forever 80s has all the great songs that are both romantic and timeless. The 80s never sounded better.
To order, call the number on your screen or send check or money order. 2 CDs, $26.99. 2 long play cassettes, $21.99. Rush delivery available. Do it now.
First the Pac-Man eats through a maze of dots. Then the Pac-Man heads for the corner spots. Then he eats his fill of a power pill. And then all those ghosts turn blue. Boo! And Pac-Man eats them all too.
Only Atari makes the Pac-Man home video game, and you can only play it on an Atari video game system.
Have you played Atari today?
And we're back.
with the 1980 Olympics. There were some pretty big events that happened in the 1980 Olympics. It was the lowest turnout in history since 1956. The United States led a boycott that had 80 participating nations. It was a protest against the 1979 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Another interesting thing that happened was when Alexander Diatan of Russia earned medals in every men's gymnastics event. He became the first athlete to win 8 medals at one Olympic game. Super heavyweight Teofilo Stevenson of Cuba became the first boxer to win the same division 3 times. Lastly, Jared Wessage of East Germany became the first male high jumper to break the world record at an Olympic game.
President Reagan. He was our nation's president for 8 out of the 10 years of this fine decade. We look back on some of his aspirations that helped shape our country into a better version of its beautiful self. The idea of Reaganomics spread across the country quickly. It called for widespread tax cuts, less social spending and more military spending, and deregulation of domestic markets. Some of this stuff probably bores you to death, but it helped our country out tremendously. Our tax revenue in 1980 was $517 billion to the $909 billion in 1988. The unemployment rate fell under 6% and inflation rate under 4%. It was one of the strongest economic times in U.S. history.
Well, This has been the recap of the 1980s decade, and we got to motor on out of here.
Catch you guys on the flip.